I can still technically say good morning, thank you. I want to thank Boaz Gonar and the ICT for the opportunity to talk with you. And as Brian said at the outset, for something a little different, maybe completely different. What I'm about to say to you is sort of a truncated briefing I gave to the Special Operations Command earlier this year. Thank you. And so as such, it's an edited, boiled down version of that. But having said that, what I'm about to say does not reflect the views of the U.S. government officially. And it's an opportunity to also draw attention to some interesting little things that we know from our own experience. You've heard the saying, everything old is new again. And I think that would hold true for some of the things I'm going to share with you. Psy-war is something I'm familiar with as a former PSYOPs officer myself long ago, back in the day of the Cold War, when it was the U.S. and the Soviet Union pitched against each other in a fairly consistent, fairly dramatic, and creative battle. It was a battle of weapons, but it was also a battle of wits. And I'm going to talk about the wits part of this, but I'm also asking you to keep all of your options open about the weaponization dimension of this as well. The subjects I'm going to talk about in relation to Psy-war have to do not only with the things that have been said so far about perception, about thinking, about your emotions, about your mental capacity, but my main argument will be, and I'll try to weave it through the things I say, that, and I don't want to be hyper dramatic here, I don't mean it to sound that way, but it is intended to get you to just go, what did he just say? Safeguard your brain. Safeguard your brain. Your brain will become, and you'll see this later on in my presentation, your brain is a juicy, available target for those who wish to manipulate it. Not just with messages that we've seen, not just with campaigns of psychology, as we know, not just with ways to tinker with your perception, but as a bona fide, non-kinetic target. I can't go into detail, but you've probably read the news about American diplomats in Havana and Guangzhou, China, who have experienced several problems: memory loss, Parkinson's, tremors, etc. That's not science fiction. It's not hocus pocus. It's the result of a very old technology being applied creatively in due circumstances. And what I am concerned about personally is it's not only just an old technology, it's a technology that people can be trained readily to use. It doesn't require a lot of skill to use it. Having said that, let me go ahead to a couple of things, which I hope. Okay. I was hoping to do that, but I wasn't sure. You know, when you're a speaker, you're just thinking, oh, I'm just going to wing it and see what happens. So anyway, as was mentioned earlier by Boaz about the question of what is reality, one of the aims of this program is to totally distort and damage your sense of reality, to totally manipulate your ability to function. So, what I mean by Psy-war is a number of things. It includes classical and novel Psy-war. Classical, in my terms, would be the things we did in the 80s, the U.S. and the Soviet Union. tricks of propaganda, tricks of disinformation, tricks of active measures. Those things are still around because they're still useful. Don't throw those things away. They're still good, as long as you know the difference between them. And I think one of the big challenges we have in the United States, as well as most of the organized world, is we don't have a ready defense to distinguish truth and fact from propaganda. I really, when we had our speaker earlier this week from, I guess it was Facebook, I really wanted to ask him. I couldn't tackle him in the hallway as he was leaving. I wanted to say, show me the algorithm that helps people distinguish between truth and propaganda. I really want to see that one. Because that's really what we need. We need it for our youth. We need it for our adults. Because the part of our brain that loves to be entertained, the part of our brain that is always fascinated by things that captivate our eye, like fine art and other things, is the open door to other things that are not necessarily good. So I won't go all through these things. You can read them, and I understand that the slides will be available later, so I won't slide you to death with the details on the slides. But I do point out, and I'm going to the very last point here, because in the old days of classical warfare between the US and the Soviet Union, there were two protagonists. Now there are 7 or 8. And I'm sure you can guess who they are. So the whole idea of what I meant, the long road, is like many things, like terrorism itself. It's a multi-generational, extended campaign designed to wear you out, make you weary, and hope that one day you'll just say, I give up. I can't take it anymore. Stop it. That's one of their fondest wishes. Of course, we can't do that. That's if you care about the outcome. So, here's the target area. We all have one of these. We all come fully equipped without batteries with these things. No batteries included. But I hang around a lot with neuroscientists, and I hang around a lot with doctors, and they've educated me because I'm just a political scientist. And what does a political scientist know? No offense, but you know, I've come to learn. Yes. So anyway, the doctors and neuroscientists tell me, and I learn more every day, that our entire body, from the top of our head to our toes, is electromagnetically wired in different ways to do different things, different functions that medical science is still trying to unravel. But you see here the different areas, the mind divided into different functional tasks, the motor cortex, the sensory cortex. Those are all areas of potential exploitation and attack. Now, I'm not saying the attackers, per se, can isolate these things and differentiate them. They're still fooling around, in my estimation, still fooling around to, as they say, zero the target a bit and find out exactly what matters most. But my point in the upper right-hand corner with that little blue box, oh, thank you again, I keep doing that. I probably should carry this around like a comedian. The little blue box is meant to tell you what we know so far about the use of RF weapons, that is radio frequency weapons, what we know about directed energy weapons, and what we know so far about acoustic wave weapons, so just to mention a few. These kinds of physical effects, headache, memory loss, perception, are all part of the, okay. All right, is that better there? Okay, I'll try to keep my head in one spot. All right, so anyway, moving on. So these things lead in terms of these variables, which again you can read, but notice certain things. It's a relentless campaign. It is not a one-off. It's relentless, it's daily, it's constant, it's focused, it's targeted. And it's aimed to exploit your biases, your weaknesses, your fears, and your doubts. But there's also a very clear cognitive, functional purpose to the technology. See, one kind of message on the left-hand side of the spectrum, if you will, is messages that you accept and you think about and you analyze, and they may or may not persuade you. What I'm talking about is at the other side of the spectrum, where some guy's aiming something at you for a number of hours over the course of several weeks, and all of a sudden you can't really think straight anymore. And as far as we can determine, non-reversible. Yes, he said that, ladies and gentlemen. So, aside from all the things that run this full spectrum, please understand it runs from the soft side. If you want to use software, hardware, that's okay too. That's a good way of remembering it, software, hardware. The software is PSYOPs, information, disinformation, active measures. The hardware is a little gun I have that shoots out the window and watches your habits and determines how long I can aim it at you over the course of never a week, okay? And then inflict the kind of outcome I want. Okay, so the classical difference, based on a number of pieces of research, I don't think that's really going to go away. I think it's not, another fact, it's not going to fall out of fashion. It won't be discarded. But instead it will be rivaled by these other new technologies that are out there. And so just a handful of studies. I'm plugging one RAND study that's kind of interesting called Truth Decay, which is kind of good. And these other reports, you'll find lots of reports out there that are published on this subject. But the point is, I think a lot of researchers, a lot of thinkers are trying to make us aware, more aware, that it's not just the messages we receive and the way we perceive them, but there's actually a technology side to this as well. So I'm suggesting here, this is sort of the beginning, and I'm just saying 2020. To me, this has been going on for 48, 49 years, especially on the software side of this. But it will continue. It'll involve electronic media. It'll insinuate itself into what we understand to be hybrid warfare, a throwaway phrase that people use all the time. But I know that when I hang out with some of my friends who I think are still friends in the WMD community, it may or may not amaze you to tell you that when I wander in and talk to them and say, I want to talk to you about this technology. And yes, I've worked with nuclear, biological, chemical weapons issues. I've been on the treaty teams. I've negotiated on those treaties. I know what that's about. But I'm asking you to make room for something to sit alongside that for a minute. I know that nuclear, chemical, and biological scare people because they have kinetic and damaging effects. But I'm asking you to make a little space in your imagination for this, because this is out there too. And we don't know yet, because the technology has not been perfected, nor has the technology been magnified for mass effect, but it's there. And one has to think, what are the potential uses, applications of this that are nefarious, damaging, not, of course, always restricted to military targets. Again, I offer for the jury the fact that of all the targets selected, they have selected our diplomats, and by the way, some Canadian diplomats as well. That's not necessarily the front lines of battle, but that's happening. So my final point is, expect this to gradually go up in the future. And that poses the wonderful question that I like to pose at this point, which is, gee whiz, if that's going on, how do I know it's going on? How in the world would I know that someone's trying to mess up my head? So it brings me to the patented McCreight way of thinking, which is the 4D philosophy, which is first you have to detect it. This applies to any threat. First you have to detect it, then you have to deter it, then you have to defend against it, and then finally you have to defeat it. Okay, very simple. But in the case of these kinds of weapons, my argument would be, if you can't detect it, you sure as heck can't defend against it. So, going on. So this is way past what we call 5th and 6th generation warfare. I put a big question mark because I'm not sure how it's going to play out in the future, but we need to be concerned about that. We need to have a strategy for how to deal with future cyber and as it's manifested in these forms of weaponization alternatives. We have to figure out how to set aside our thinking about future weapons. I mean, we know about hypersonic weapons. We know about all kinds of new weapons that are being developed that are deployable, crew-served, man-portable, or whatever, technologically based. And that's fine, very important, no question about it. But let's make room in our imagination for these. And let's try to figure out what they all mean and what we should do about it. So, beyond WMD, I'm arguing for the small d, which are weapons of mass disruption. Okay, and in weapons of mass disruption, we have AI, cyber, neurocognitive, man-made systems. Now, for 1 minute, let me please deliver yet another commercial to you, which is, I've been arguing to our military audiences for a long time that we have to define strategic spaces, and we have to be very aware of the strategic spaces beyond what we're comfortable with. That is nanospace. Of course, we all know about outer space, but nanospace, genomic space, cyberspace, neurospace. These are all potential domains of future conflict because they're carvable, identifiable spatial domains of activity. And if you're familiar with the old rock and roll song From Kansas, Dust in the Wind, where I tend to play for a few bars of that, and then I make the argument about dust being dual use science and technology. Watch out for dust in the wind, because dual use science and technology is there to curse us as well as bless us. And so we'd be thinking, I come to a close here, we'd be thinking about these things. These ideas are meant to stimulate thought about what the future threat may or may not look like. It may continue to be chemical, biological, nuclear. It may add AI, it may add machine learning, it may add a few other things. But I'm submitting to you for your judgment whether you think the neurocognitive, hybrid, mixtures of different kinds is actually going to happen. And the need for us to come up with responsive strategies to it, because if I'm telling you it's coming or it's here, you only have two alternatives, which is duh, or I think I need to do something about it. So that's it. Thank you.